Bass Kayak and Beers is sponsored in part by Douglas Rod. Go to douglasoutdoors.com to check out their full lineup and locate your nearest authorized dealer. You know what time it is, boys and girls? It is Bass Kayak and Beers podcast on the Paddle and Fin Network. Great for you today. As always, I got Brayn Scarberry. You might know him from the Hobie BOS at Sam Rayburn. He had a great tournament. I think he won first place on that one. And now, follow up to that, the encore was the KATS tournament at Lake Travis, also in Texas. And we're going to be talking about, more than anything, his showing at Lake Travis and the differences between both lakes, Sam Rayburn and Lake Travis. Even though it's kind of like both Central Texas, you can say they're very, very different lakes. So I'm very interested to see how Brayn Scarberry approached each lake and what did he saw in each body of water that helped him get that W. So it's going to be a great show. I hope you guys enjoy it. Before we get started, quick shout out to the guys at KBN, Jeff Mallett and Ryan Lambert. Once again, they're doing a great job promoting the Save JT tournament, which is going to be on Tourney X throughout the month of July. It's going to be nationwide the whole month. A couple of the details that I got from Bryan that I wanted to share. It's all proceeds go directly to Save JT. Once again, to pay for his medical bills and treatment. If you haven't heard my podcast last week with Jason Borofka, his dad, who got 7th place at the Bass Nation Kayak Series. Also, KBN did a podcast last week. You can listen to mine, listen to KBN. Doesn't matter. Just let's get the word out on Jason Borofka's family and his son, which suffers from one of the most rare disease. So go ahead, go check him out. Sign up for that tournament. Save JT. Look it up on Tourney X. All proceeds, again, go to Save JT. Tourney X is not getting staying with any of the proceeds or any fees. So shout out to Dwayne Wally for what he's doing. A bunch of prizes. There is so many companies right now donating prizes, like Douglas, my sponsor, Douglas Rods, is donating a couple of rods and a few of their merch. Also, there's going to be live auctions for world-class hunting trips and fishing guide trips. So once again, go check it out. It's $50 entry fee. And again, it helps out. Even if you're not going to participate, please consider signing up for the tournament and helping the Borofka family. So once again, let's bring in Brayn Scarberry. Bryan, how you doing, man? Thank you for coming up to the show.
Hey, man, I appreciate the invite. I'm doing good. You know, I'm just on my way home from work, so it's a good time to talk about fishing.
Right? Anything to get your mind out of a Monday blues?
Yeah, exactly.
How was the weekend?
It was good. It was good. I did a little frog tournament on Decker on Sunday. But other than that, it was same old, same old.
Awesome, man. So for those watching on YouTube, if you notice, I just spilled beer on myself while talking to Bryan. So that's pretty funny. Go check it out on Facebook or YouTube. Bryan couldn't be on the video, but once again, it's the audio that we're most interested in listening to his story. But funny blooper right there. I just spilled beer on myself. So, Bryan, sorry about that.
Hey, you're good, man.
An embarrassment. Just Bass Kayak and Beers in here. I'm spilling beer on myself. So you had a great weekend?
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. I had fun, man. We caught a bunch of fish at Decker on a frog, and you know that was my first frog only tournament. Man, I want to get another one going, maybe at a different lake, like Choke Canyon or something like that.
Is that? Let me ask you this, and kind of off topic here, but is that like a Southern Texas thing? Because I've heard some of those frog tournaments, frog fishing, tournaments, and I've always that's got to be. Like every time I hear about a tournament like that, somewhere in Southern Texas.
No, I actually think they started out in California. I know Spro started the first one, but I don't know where the first one was at. But I know it was a big thing in California, and I'm sure it's a big thing in Texas or in Florida too. You know, I think any of these southern states that just have a really good frog bite. If you have any, that's the funny thing is when you're fishing a regular tournament, you just try to get bites, so you're not really throwing the stuff you enjoy throwing all day long. But, when you're in a frog only tournament, you're like, hey, I have a perfect excuse to throw a frog all day long. You know? I think I had four rods with 4 different frogs on, and yeah, it was definitely fun, you know, to hone in. And I'll tell you one thing, I need to get better. I need to work out my wrist a little bit more, because walking a frog for 6 hours straight is taxing.
Yeah, it's a workout. I actually was fishing on tournament this weekend, and by the time it was 1 hour before it lines out, I was like, might as well throw a frog right here, because right now I'm struggling. And sure enough, first cast, I get a blow up. I missed it. It didn't catch it clean, but I was like, well, go figure.
Yeah.
I ended up throwing, after that, I ended up throwing a brush hog by Zoom. And I got that idea from, I want to say it was Jeff Isham, if I'm not mistaken. I had him on my podcast last year. And one of the things he said, if you get a blow up on a moving bait like a frog or anything, the next thing you should throw is a creature bait, something that's small. And I've asked him, whoop, we lost Brayn Scarberry there. Let's see if we can get him back. And he's back. There we go.
I'm back.
Yep, I'm back. Here you go. So, no worries.
Yeah, no, I heard you about the brush hog for sure. That's a, yeah. I think for me, my follow-up bait is usually either a fluke or a Cinco, something that's going to fall a little bit slower. But, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong that you can throw in there after they blow up, as long as you get in there quick. Yeah. You know?
And sure enough, I got a 16.5 bass out of it. That was last bass I got out of the tournament. It's like 1 hour to go. But anyways, we're going to talk about your tournament, because your tournament was a lot more exciting than mine was. So you won the KATS at Lake Travis. Tell me a little bit about that, man. How was that tournament? What worked for you, and what were the adjustments that you made, if you had to make any at all?
Well, I got, like, the Sunday before I was gonna practice, so I went actually to a different area than I normally fish. I really don't fish Travis a lot, so I haven't explored the lake a whole bunch, but I know up the river, you know, obviously we also had Jacob Wheeler do really good fishing a swim jig. So I wanted to see what I could find up there, and I found some pretty good fish, but I didn't think it was enough. You know, if 2 or 3 other guys had the same idea, those dock fish are super spooky. So if somebody gets to that dock before you're not going to get a bite, or you're going to have to really work for it if you do. So I kind of abandoned that and decided to just go back to the same stretch that I fished the year before for KATS. And I won last year as well, which is kind of funny, because I think I fished Travis for the KATS event, and then I might have fished it once or twice between that KATS event and this KATS event. So it seems like I know that lake really well, but I really don't. It's just a fun lake. But so I ended up going back to the same stretch, and I just figured I'd, you know, kind of junk fish and see what I could figure out the day of the tournament. And, you know, I think my third cast, I caught a 17.5 on a whopper flopper.
Nice.
Caught a couple more on a top water, and then I found a little point in the back of a little pocket, and it had some flooded grass that I could see on the live scope, and I could see some bluegill and stuff in there, so it seemed like a really good spot. And sure enough, I threw a soft jerk bait back up in there. I caught one pretty quick, a little small one, like 13 inches, and then a couple casts after that, I caught I think it was a 21 something, which is, I mean, Travis is not known for big fish. You know, you know, I don't know if you guys fish it very much, but it's not a place where you catch a lot of 20 pluses. So I was shocked to get that one. And as you know, I try to make the most of my time. So I got that fish in the kayak, got him unhooked, and I figured, I was like, I might as well cast this fluke out there and let it start sinking while I'm getting this one measured and pictured. So chunked it back out, maybe 5 feet away from where I caught the one that I had on the board. Took my pictures, let him go. I pick up the rod, and there's weight on there. Set the hook, and I see this fish start waking across the surface. It's like she had eaten it and was just swimming, really, really shallow. And that was like a 22 and a quarter. So it was even bigger than the first one that I caught. And she was a dinosaur, man. Big old head. Just a really, really cool looking fish. But, it was kind of back to back. And then I fished around, and I caught a lot of fish on top waters and the soft jerkbait throughout the day. And I think I ended up with 90. After that second fish I caught in that spot, I was at 90 inches, and that was at 6:45, and first lines in was at 6. So it was pretty shocking. But I knew, like, the guys we fish against in KATS, that they're some of the best in Texas, and
yes,
and they figure it out. They always figure it out. So I knew if I was catching them like that, somebody else was. I just knew they were. So I didn't let off. I just kept pushing and pushing. And later in the day, the fluke bite kind of slowed down, and I started throwing a Texas rig. I was throwing a watermelon seed ribbon tail, and wasn't really getting it. I get a couple little taps, but it's hard to say if they were bluegill or if they were bass. But nothing was really committing to it. So I decided to switch up to motor oil, and I think second cast with motor oil, I caught a 16, and then like 2 or 3 casts after that, I caught another 20 and a quarter. That I think that was that one right there.
Yeah, that's the 20. If I don't mistaken, that's the 22 and a quarter.
Oh, is that the big one? Okay,
that's a big, beautiful fish, by the way. Yeah, and she has some broad shoulders there.
Yeah, man. When she came up the first time, all I saw, that water's so clear, you could see their head shake and all that. And just by the size of her head, I was like, oh my God, this is a giant. I thought it was gonna be an 8 or 9 pounder, but her back half's lacking a little bit. But yeah, so later in the day, I picked up that motor oil and made that change, and I caught like 3 or 4 fish in one spot, and one of those was that last 20 that bumped me up to 96. It was a fun day. I caught a ton of fish, and I think I was just fortunate to stumble across 3 good ones that gave me a good limit that day. So.
Nice. You ended up dominating that tournament, by the way. It was like, what was it? You won by like 8 inches. And let me share that here, because it was kind of impressive. And again, it's Lake Travis, and I fished Lake Travis once, and obviously you can tell me more about it, but it seems like it's not this big bass factory that we're so accustomed to seeing in Central Texas.
Definitely not.
It's a beautiful lake, by the way. It's very...
Oh, it is. Gorgeous.
I think it's more like a California-style lake, I want to say, like West Coast kind of lake. It's deep, super clear water, very rocky when it's not flooded like it was, but very rocky, very little vegetation, right? When it's its normal level.
There's almost no aquatic vegetation to speak of. This event, I think the lake had risen like 4 feet. So some of the stuff that was growing on the bank was underwater. And that's really what I was targeting, is that grass that had been flooded. I was trying to stay, I caught most of my fish on kind of points or secondary points, little key spots like that. There were a ton of fish offshore, and you could sit out there on offshore and catch, probably 50, 60 fish in a day, but finding those bigger ones was a lot harder. And, I know one thing at Travis is there's always some big fish cruising the banks.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that Jacob Wheeler is just throwing that whopper flopper and catching those 5-pounders. That's kind of the thing on Travis, is you can spend all day fishing the banks, and you could either catch 2 5-pounders, or you can catch nothing.
Yeah.
So it's a gamble, but they are there. But like you said, it's definitely not like a typical, Texas lake where 100 inches is the usual limit. I think last year I won, it was low 90s, maybe 91, if that. And that's the typical limits that come out of Travis is, high 80s, low 90s.
Yeah, it's a very high pressure since because it's such a beautiful lake, especially in summer, the boat traffic, jet skis, pleasure boaters, wakeboard. I mean, it gets crazy. It gets really crazy.
Oh yeah, I was fishing in wakes all day long.
Yeah, it's a type of lake that I was like, and I mean, not to criticize KATS because they do a great tournament. I think KATS is the longest running kayak fishing tournament, not only in Texas, but I've heard it's nationwide. It's the longest running tournament.
Really?
So that's what I've heard, and I think it's been like this is like 10 or 12 years, something like that. I'm sure it's the longest running kayak tournament in Texas.
Time.
Yeah. So they know what they're doing. And they're backed up by ACK, but it's one of those lakes that's like, really, we got to put that lake on the middle of summer. Like, couldn't you get it like earlier? And it's very interesting because the one time I fished it, that's what I noticed. Like the swim jig bite, and I get it because it's such a rocky bank, no vegetation at all. You figured what else are the fish gonna eat other than bait fish? I mean, you're not gonna see much frogs or anything else, or lizards or anything crossing around the banks because there's really no vegetation. So all there is pretty much bait fish. That's pretty much like gotta be like 99% of their bite. Well, maybe crawfish too as well. But they really are just cruising around the bank. It's not your typical let's look for structures offshore, or because it's such a deep lake, or let's look for flooded timber. It's just pretty much throw on the bank and hope you get them schooling kind of thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, those bigger fish, I feel like they kind of isolate themselves from the smaller ones. Because I mean, usually when you catch a bigger one, you're not really, on a school or anything like that. They're kind of cruising on their own. But yeah, they at Travis, the main structure is docks. There's thousands of docks on Travis, and that's really the only thing that's consistent. I know, like last year you had a little bit because the lake was really, really low for a long time, and then it came back up. While it was low, there was a lot of bigger trees and bushes that had grown up. So, a year, 2 years ago, there was actually a lot of like bushes and stuff you could fish, and there still is some trees left over. So there's more structure than there was in the past, I guess you could say. But it's definitely, they're starting to erode and starting to, fall apart because of all the wakes. I know there was a little group of stick-ups that I fished last year that I did really good in, and I didn't get to like look at my area before I showed up on tournament day. So I turned the corner on that point expecting to see a bunch of stick-ups, and they were all gone, like completely gone. So I don't know if
hammered by the wake.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was the wakes or the homeowners that were along there went and pulled them up, but it's hard to say. But yeah, so and then because it went up 4 feet, a lot of those bushes and stuff are out, in 10, 15 feet of water now. And they, for some reason, there really wasn't too many fish around them. You saw the bluegill and crappie and stuff, but the bass really weren't out there. The bass, a lot of bass were out there suspended, and you could see them on the live scope chasing bait, but they're so finicky. I know a couple of my friends did pretty good in practice, and then come tournament day, they were like shut off offshore. So it's kind of one of those lakes you never know what to expect too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, the water clarity on it is, I mean, you can tell, you can make sense they're so finicky and they're usually so deep, especially on summer when the water gets really hot. because it's such a clear lake, those warm temperatures really go down, and I think they get more, even in winter too, they get even more deeper than in typical Texas, East Texas lake. And it makes sense that it'd be so finicky because it's the water clarity. It's crazy. I mean, you can see on a good day, I've seen it like, what, 20, 30 feet of visibility if it's not too much boat traffic.
Yeah, obviously as you get down to the lower end of the lake, it gets clearer. Down at the lower end, you could probably get 20, maybe 20 feet of visibility. The area that I was fishing, I mean, was still probably 10 feet at least. And I was mid lake, so yeah, that's definitely a big factor. You definitely got to keep that in mind. That's kind of why I started throwing the fluke the way I was throwing it. I was throwing on a really light wire hook. It's actually a owner cover shot hook. A lot of guys use it for drop shot, but I actually like it for flukes and Cincos. It's super light, so the baits fall really slow. And I feel like in that clearer water, especially when they're kind of cruising around and they're not actually like in one spot, they can see it from farther away, and it gives them more time to catch up to it before it's actually on the bottom, I think that was a big part, because a lot of the fish I was catching, they would hit it pretty much within 2 or 3 feet of the surface. It didn't fall very far before they would pick it up. So I was feeling like something like early in the morning, something like a Texas rig would have just fallen right past their face, and they probably wouldn't have messed with it,
That's a good point. So let me ask you this: you had a great tournament at the Hobie BOS in Sam Rayburn, and now you follow up with Lake Travis. We were talking about it and the irony of like two different lakes kind of in the same general area, but you fished it pretty much the same. How was it different? How was it similar from what you fished in Sam Rayburn?
Sam Rayburn, the water level at Sam Rayburn was insanely high. I think it broke the lake record for height. So it was like 12 feet high. And at Rayburn, I was fishing this stuff they call hay grass, which is like a floating grass that grows really, really close to the bank. And so that was actually flooded, and those fish were up in that stuff. And that's what I was targeting at Rayburn. So it's kind of funny that I was kind of fishing the same type of structure at Travis. I was fishing that flooded, just land grass basically. But like you were saying, I mean, Rayburn, you'd be lucky to get a foot of visibility when we were there, and it's not a rocky lake. It's completely different lake, but the structure was the fish relating to the same structure was kind of interesting, because at Travis you think rock, there's tons of big rocky points and big boulders and stuff for them to hang around. And at Rayburn you have, acres of hydrilla, but the hydrilla was 15 feet underwater or more. So it's funny that when the lakes come up, these bass kind of do the same things. They move up, but they don't move all the way up. They kind of hang around those grass edges.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've actually, going back to a tournament that I had this weekend, I was in Ray Roberts, which was very flooded, and there was parts, I'm loose term here of forest, not a forest, but just a group of trees. And, it was like water depth on what it would have been shore was about 5 to 6 feet. So I was able to navigate through the trees and get to the back of the trees, where it would be almost to the road. I'm thinking, well, there may be bass there, looking for shade and water. And what I found out is learning experience. They weren't there. They were more at the edge of that, kind of like they moved up, but they didn't move completely up. And that was really interesting because I would have figured, okay, well, they're back. They got to be back there. And that's one of the things that I always wonder, when you get this flooded lakes, a lot of times we could fall into that trend where we go all the way back because they're hiding over there. And not necessarily, I don't know that biological reasons why, but maybe just me thinking they're not used to that area. They're not familiar with that area. So they probably just say, like, we're going to get deeper, but not all the way deep where we can, where it's more like not the typical vegetation or area on that lake. And again, that's just me kind of in trying to interpret what the bass are thinking. But that's a good point and a good learning experience. We tend to think, they're going to be way back there, and they're really not. At least the experience that I've had, kind of around that time, we went through a dry spell where even if for those that love doing that whole Google Earth, pin him and upload him to your fish finder, you can see 2012, up to like 2014, all the lakes around here were like really not really dried up, but some of them were like, Jesus, that's like 20 feet
Medina Lake, which is near my house, I think it was 4% of capacity.
Wow. Even over here, Eagle Mountain Lake was like almost dried up. I was like, what is this? So now the last 5 years, Texas, especially Austin, has been every spring has been hit by consistent flooding or lots and lots of rain compared to what 5 years ago. So it has changed, I think, a lot of what you used to fish back to what it is fishing now. And it's really interesting. Like I said, it's one of those things that I'm trying to learn on flooded lakes. How deep do I think those bass are gonna go when
and I
it's
think
flooded?
That's one thing. I think that's one thing that benefited me is where I fish, and the years that I've got. I've fished a lot of lakes that went down and then all of a sudden got flooded. I fished choke back in the day when it was getting flooded. I fished Amistad and Falcon, when they were really low and then they would go up. So I have a lot of experience fishing those lakes when they flood. And I was going to ask you, when you went to go fish the lake with the trees that you were just talking about, how soon from the time the water went up to the time you were there, how much time had gone by?
That has been okay. We've been hit by rain consistently, I want to say, for like the last 3 weeks. It's been like just the last 3 weeks have been really flooded, especially the last two. I think the height of the lake has been the last two, and now it's slowly starting to come down. So I want to say it's been like at least 2 or 3 weeks where the water level has reached the water level at the lake, I should say, has reached its maximum.
See, that's what I've noticed is, like, if a lake floods and it comes up really quick, those bass, they move up. They want to explore that new water. They want to eat. I mean, you can only imagine how many frogs and bugs and 1,000 different animals that they can eat are up there. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to go and just feast. And that's what I've noticed. If you can get there within 2 or 3 days of that flood, you can get on those fish super shallow and catch them, in really fun ways, like a frog and a swim jig and a buzzbait, stuff like that. But I feel like after like a week or so, they kind of they get bored with it. They run out of stuff to eat, and they go back, out towards kind of where they were before, or some sort of structure, more related to where the lake was. And that's at Rayburn, everyone was up in the brush, and they were catching a lot of fish, but it was a little tougher, and then I figured, from my experience, I feel like a lot of those fish start moving back out to where they were before. And that's exactly where I started catching them. So, it's really fun, to guys listening and they want to get some experience, go out there and fish your flooded lakes and get some experience on what these fish like to do, Yeah,
that's a good point. And again, a little nugget of information for those out there listening. Thank you for sharing that, because I again, this is something that I've kind of like starting to learn about it. It's like, it's the last 2 or 3 years I've been really hitting that back of those lakes 2 or 3 weeks after the floods, but it's not producing the bites that I thought. And it's always at that edge. It's kind of like, to me, it's like that grass right in front of the timber, of not standing timber like your typical flooded lake. It's just like those
Like
trees
bushes.
that are not so, those trees that are not supposed to be 4 or 5 feet with water level, mid trunk. That's the point where I think they started hanging out. That brush and that grass leading up to those trees that are partially on the water is where I think you found the most of bait.
Another big thing is, when you're fishing flooded brush like that, the type of bush makes a huge difference, because these plants, they put off chemicals in the water. They some bushes will start rotting and decaying much faster than others. And so one thing that I've noticed when the water floods like that, if you can find willow trees, there will always be more fish on a willow tree than there will be on any other type of tree.
Really, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't, and one thing I like about willow trees too is that they don't have a lot of real knotty limbs and stuff. So you tend to get your fish out of those willow trees a lot better than you would, like an oak tree or something that's a lot more dense and brushy. But yeah, you definitely, if you're fishing flooded lakes and you're flipping bushes that are flooded, make sure you pay attention to where you're catching your fish. And if you see a willow tree, spend a little bit extra time on that one for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know, like you mentioned, it could be the chemicals in their leaves and the sap. I would tend to think it's maybe because the willow tree is the type of kind of like low hanging branch and leaves, and kind of giving this wide range of shade, probably what draws them in. That's really interesting. We really don't have. I think Lake Grapevine has a willow tree that once I flooded. I've actually, if I remember correctly, I think I skipped a Senko once there and I caught a fish. It was funny. I found a big catfish. It was a balloon that was swimming across the current. I'm like, there's got to be something there, and the balloon was almost. There's a guy out here in Lake Grapevine that fishes for catfish on balloon. I've never seen that before. And he just basically just lets a balloon, when it's really windy, just lets the balloon out with bait, and that thing will be like a quarter of a mile out on the lake, and he's on the shore just with a spinning rod. And I'm like, what the heck is this? So one of them broke off, I guess, and it got caught off in the willow tree.
We do that here for redfish at Bryan and Calaveras. We have those two freshwater lakes with redfish.
Oh,
and, there's a spot. It's closed now, but it used to be called the Crappie Wall, and it's actually the intake for the power plant. And it's this big, long channel, and so you can get up. You used to be able to get up on this concrete wall that blocked, that channel, so you can't go back in there. So if the wind was blowing right, those redfish kind of know to stay farther than the normal casting distance. It's kind of funny how they figure that out. So we would throw a balloon rig and just let the wind push that bait as far. I mean, I've had it times where it's 150 yards away from me, and they'll hit it out there, and it's awesome. And my favorite thing we would go out at night and put a glow stick in the balloon. So you would let it float way out there where you could just barely see it, and then wait for that glow stick to disappear, and you just watch that thing go under.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. This is the first. Well, last year was the first time I saw that, and I saw it. I've seen it a couple of times. Lake Travis too. I caught it, not caught, but I saw a huge red striper not red striper. I'm thinking of redfish. A huge striper. Same thing with a little Gatorade bottle painted with the phone number and the date. That thing had been hooked for like 2 weeks. The hook was already rusting and kind of like rusting in its mouth, and it was kind of disgusting. So I let it free. I didn't even call the guy because I figured he's not gonna want this fish. It had been 2 weeks. So, but it's funny because he had that little Gatorade bottle and the phone number in it. I was trying to figure out what it was. And I figured, I'll grab it, call the guy, tell him, where I am. He can come pick it up if it's in there around the area. And when I saw the date and I saw the bad shape of that striper, I was like, I'll just let it go. I feel bad for that thing.
Absolutely.
I found that catfish on that willow tree, kind of stuck in there, wrapped around some brushes or anything. It was huge catfish. I tried to look for the guy. I didn't see it. I know I've seen the guy before. I didn't see it. And the balloon was almost deflated. So I ended up giving it to a family that was fishing for catfish. I'm like, hey, I don't see the owner of this balloon, but I mean, you can have it, I guess. Either that or I let it go. But so going back to what we were saying, I know we got off topic. Yeah, so that willow tree, I think in Lake Grapevine, I've seen one willow tree though. It got flooded last year. I think last year was the one that really, really got flooded.
Yeah.
And yes, you're right. You found some on below that willow tree. So that's a good point. That's a pretty good idea, man. I'm getting a lot of information here. I need to take notes before I post this.
It's a good thing it's
might come in handy.
You don't have to remember.
Yeah, right. So, Bryan, I know you're driving home and you've been here for the last 40 minutes. So I don't want to take too much time with you. Tell us a little bit before I let you go. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into kayak fishing and tournament fishing. Man.
Well, so I actually I've bass fished since I was in middle school. I think I started the first fishing club in our middle school, and bass fishing has just been a passion for me since I was little. And I started fishing tournaments when I was in high school and did pretty well in those. And then, life gets in the way. You have a kid and fishing's got to go on the back burner for a little while. Mm-hmm. So I finally got back to a position where I could start fishing again, and kayaking just worked better. It was a lot easier to do. It allowed me to have more time on the water, versus like a bass boat. You got to kind of keep in mind how much gas you're going to use and this and that. But with the kayak, I mean, I could go out for 2 or 3 hours and it was no sweat off my back. It didn't cost me a whole lot of money. So it was perfect. And then, I started seeing the kayak tournaments start developing and stuff. And I started getting interested, and I finally got a kayak, I finally got a Hobie Pro Angler where I felt like I could be more competitive and more efficient on the water. And once I did that, I started fishing KATS in 2020. The rest is history. I can't wait to continue down this journey and see where it takes me. I love kayak fishing. I love the tournament aspect of it. I love that we can let those fish go as soon as we catch them.
Yep.
I think it's a really, really great format. It has a big future.
It does, and we hope it keeps growing. Let me ask you this, and I always like to ask this to some of the tournament anglers locally, because we have, especially in Central Texas, such a great group of guys over there that are absolutely, tearing it up when it comes to tournament fishing. In North Texas, we got Guillermo Gonzalez, Matt Scotch. I know you're down in Central Texas around that area. Brian Howell, Orlando Nandine, the list goes on and on. How do you won the Hobie BOS at Sam Rayburn, and you won the KATS tournament, which is completely different lake. You won it this year, you won it last year. When you look at some of the top anglers out there, the Russ Snyders, Jody Queens, Christine Fisher, how do you feel you stack up to some of them?
Man, I would like to think I have a pretty good shot fishing against them. I that's kind of what I went to the Hobie event for. I was like, man, I really want to fish against some of these national guys and just see what I can do. And actually, drove to Rayburn Thursday morning, actually Friday morning. So the only day I got to practice on Rayburn was Friday, and I felt
Wow.
like that was really going to hurt me. But I just found the right area, for map studies and all that stuff, and I got lucky and was able to launch where I wanted to launch, and it all just worked out. But I feel like I think I could compete with them. That's the great thing about bass fishing, though, is like it doesn't matter how good you are, you're never going to win all of them.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to have their shot. Things are going to line up for you, and if you're prepared and you're ready for it, you're gonna take home the win. So it's really interesting. I think I know I had a little bit of an attitude as far as I'm better than them, at times. But when you really sit down and think about it, it's like, man, I think we're all good at what we do.
Mm.
We're all great at what we do, and I think sometimes things work out for this person, especially like the lake and the time of year and the structure. It just works out to what you like doing and what you're good at, what you have more experience at, and that's what I really really love about bass fishing, is that you always have a chance.
Mhm.
You're never going to go in a tournament and be like, oh, there's no way I'm going to win this. You always have a chance, always.
Let me ask you this real quick, and I know I, I don't want to keep you too long because I know you're getting home, but if I can get a little bit of information that I would love to know. When we
Yeah.
talk about Sam Raven, I'll leave it up to you if you want to answer how deep, down the rabbit hole and give out the secrets you want. So I'm going to be as vague as you want or as detailed as you want. I'll leave it up to you. But when you look at Sam Raven, everything was so flooded. So how did you determine, okay, what did you saw that would say, okay, I'm gonna try this spot first, and I think this is where it's gonna be? Because it's different when it's a normal level, but when it's so flooded, I mean, they could be anywhere. What
Yeah,
draws you
and
to
so
say, hey, this is the spot where I think it's gonna be?
and so that's a really really good question.
Thank you.
So what I think about, like you said, when an area floods, and they can go back up in those trees, they can go anywhere, between the tree line and the bank. So I want to minimize that area between the tree line and the bank as much as possible. So what I'm looking for when it floods is the steepest banks, a creek with really, really steep banks, not a lot of real shallow flats so they can really just spread out. I want them to be as concentrated as possible. And if, I picked this area because I had a lot of options. I had some main lake points that I knew had some grass on them. I had some really long points that actually had some trees on top that those fish could move up into those trees and feed and then move back out. They had an option to move in and out easily, and there wasn't a lot of area for them to get lost in those trees. So I feel like anytime that you could find an area where that is compressed and they don't have to move a long ways to get from where they're sleeping and where they're eating. That's going to be your high percentage areas, and that's what I looked for when I was doing my map study at Rayburn. And I found there were a lot of creeks that I had circled, and the one that I had found just worked out. I have a classic coming up, so the area I'll keep a little bit under wraps.
Yeah, definitely. But that's a great point, man. And thank you for sharing that insight. That's really good. So, Bryan, again, before I let you go, I want to give you a few minutes to shout out to anybody you want to shout out, family members, friends that make your kayak fishing life a little bit better. Any sponsors? If you have any sponsors or anybody that you want to thank, go ahead.
No sponsors yet. I'm working on it. But definitely, Garmin LiveScope has been absolutely invaluable tool for sure. I use a lot of 13 fishing products that are great. I love their reels, their rods. Their customer service is unbeatable. I do want to thank my wife. She puts up with a lot of stuff, and allows me to get out there on the water every chance I can. And, time on the water is crucial. So also all the guys in San Antonio, it was really cool that they were all watching along at Rayburn. They were sending me messages. I didn't have very good signal on the water, but whenever I got off, I got a ton of messages saying, oh man, you got this, and that was really cool. So the kayak community all together is great. Like what we're doing with the Save JT tournament. It's just incredible what we can do when we all get together, with one common goal. It's awesome.
Yes, I agree. And we'll look forward to, watching this sport grow and look forward to what's next for you. You mentioned the Classic. Other than the Classic, anything else on the agenda as far as kayak fishing goes?
So the next big tournament is the Throwdown, which I got second place last year. So
Nice.
we'll see what I can do this year. And then we have the KATS Classic at Rayburn, which is going to be fun because it's going to be later in the year. It's going to be in the fall, which is always a wild card. And then actually I fish Rayburn, and then the following weekend I'm going to fish the Hobie Championship in Alabama at Eufaula.
Nice, man.
So,
Good luck on that.
Thank you. That's going to be fun. I am so excited. I can't even explain how excited I am to go fish that. It's awesome to get a chance, especially only fishing one Hobie event. And I just got extremely fortunate to qualify for that. And I'm just so excited. I'm just so thankful that everything worked out the way it did.
And again, you should be proud. Qualifying for the Hobie TOS is not any easy feat. To me, that's the best run tournament out there. That's a tournament for the elites of the elites. Anybody that qualifies for the TOC, in my mind, is got to be a great hammer, just because Hobie does a great job. And as the sports grows and Bass Nation gets involved, I really hope Hobie BOS keeps on the spotlight, because to me it's very angler friendly. And it's really caters to the elites, the guys that really, the road warriors that really put on a hard work. So big shout out to AJ McWhorter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Hobie BOS event, we're 100% professional from Friday to Sunday. It was incredible how well everything was run. There was no questions about anything. Everything was well explained. I was super impressed with how well that went.
That's it. And it's I know it's kind of like taking shots here, and take it for what it's worth for those out there listening. I'm glad other tournaments, other organizations are getting involved. Don't get distracted by the glitter. Watch what Hobie BOS is doing. They are legit the best tournament run out there. And some guys don't like it because they don't allow motors. That's a subject for a different day, and I'm not going to talk about that. Just on the way it's run, it is, best by far, heads and shoulders above anybody else out there. Really catered to the anglers. Even on the small details, that nod or tipping that hat to Brian Howell when he won the tournament that he won, and then the next tournament here, the ID card was a picture of Brian Howell. Those are small things that you have to really hand it to AJ McWhorter. Giving that nod to the local, that put on a show in the last tournament. Those are some small details that I really appreciate of what they're doing. Oh, shout out to them for what they're doing. So again, Bryan, if you don't mind, we're going to end the recording, but stick around. You mentioned something about sponsorship, so I wanted to talk to you about that. But for those out there listening, thank you once again for tuning into the Bass, Kayak, and Beer segment on the Paddle and Fin podcast. Shout out to Douglas Outdoors. They're a sponsor of my podcast. Go check them out, douglasoutdoors.com. Check out their rods. Find out where's your nearest dealer or online dealer. You can order one. So, again, thank you. We're your PFDs. And, Bryan, if you don't mind, stick around and Have a great.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode on Paddle and Fin. Don't forget to go check out our website at paddle.fin.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at Paddle and Fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest on a future episode, feel free to email us at paddle@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paddle and Fin on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our show supporters, Angler. The Angler button and app just makes for a better time on the water and creates a virtual logbook for every fishing outing out on the water. Shout out to Rocktown Adventures, located in northern Illinois, for all your kayaking, camping, and hiking needs. Shout out to Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com